going to begin kind of the way I did last week, because we all have memories of mother or grandmother or children, grandchildren. We all have different memories. And last week when I talked about friends, I asked people to share them, which you did. So I'm going to do the same today. I asked people to send me memories, stories about their kids or their moms, and I had so many that it was hard to figure out what to do with them. And they were all good. The primary thing people said was they were just so thankful that they could see their grandchildren and all their family this year. But I'm going to pause for a second and just give you a moment to think. And if you have something, a short something, that you can share regarding a mom or a child or grandchild, I would appreciate it. Let's start. Somebody, share with me a memory. And remember, I have all day. Which is not entirely true, because I have this wonderful lunch, I've prepared for my wife. Memory of a mother, a mom, a granddaughter, a daughter, a child, a son, anybody. You guys are usually the lively ones. Anna, stand up, please. Stand up, please. And turn so people can all hear you.
When my granddaughter was first born, my daughter had a C-section and the baby was crying and everybody was cold. So I thought, oh, my kids will go all the way to the embrace. So there we are in the room. Not in the very well, but we sit there and know that. And I'm holding her very soft, her little ears.
Very nice. Someone else? Anybody? Yeah, please, Marcia.
My daughter was almost 30. My daughter was almost 30 and she didn't start having kids. And she wrote me when they were about 4 and said, Mom, how did we ever go to choir rehearsal with you when you kept us quiet? And I said, well, you remember we had a big suitcase full of toys that you could only play with during a choir rehearsal. Wow, Mom, you're so smart. 30 years later.
I saw someone in the back. Yeah.
I just remember my grandmother and grandma, my mom spending all day during the summer canning vegetables. Just the memories of the whole family being together canning vegetables is something they go out right off.
Did you have cousins who liked to pick you up and stick you in the pickle barrel and lock it down?
No, I was a bigger kid.
Yeah, Omer.
One of my favorite memories of my mother happened when my daughter was very, very young, and she was fussing. She might have been 6 months old. And I'm walking and pacing up and down this room and thinking, come on, child, you gotta quiet down. My mom looked at me and she said, give her to me. Why? Just give her to me. And I handed my daughter to my mother, and she held her, swallowed her tightly, and the child went quiet. I was not pleased. But I love my mom, and we would.
It's the touch. Yeah. Someone else? Anybody? Yeah, please.
One of my fondest
You can take it
memories.
long if you want for now.
One of my fondest memories with my grandmother and mother is that at every holiday, all the women in my family, my grandma, my mom, my aunts, we would all sit around the table and sing The Sweetest Gift, which is a song by Linda Ronstadt, which is about a mother's unconditional love, which is the sweetest gift. So it's something that we do every time we get together.
Very nice. Anyone else have something they'd like to share? Yes, please.
I FaceTimed with my 2-year-old grandson the other day, and for the first time, he said, "Hi, Granny," and he smiled, a big smile on his face.
Very
That made my day.
Yeah, it's special, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I have time for one more if someone has a... They're all about your children. What about you? Pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our salvation. Amen. Some of you may have been here long enough to remember my mother. She moved to St. Petersburg in 2004 when my family moved here, and she stayed with us until she passed away a few years later. And some of you know, it's an interesting thing when you get to that stage when suddenly you are the caregiver and the parent is the care receiver. That roles flip and things, they just change. They just change. And some people handle that better than others. Some children handle their parents better, and some parents just are really hard on their children and make it very difficult. I can't relate to that. My mother was really easy in those regards. And though her Alzheimer's, which eventually took her life, became more and more prevalent and challenging, it also gave, because, when you go through life, it's rather cliche to say, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, but, if your eyes are open, there are many serendipities, many joys that you experience in life that people miss, and sometimes you just have to laugh. She would call our house, 5, 10, 20, 100 times in the afternoon. And, well, that's an exaggeration. Preachers can do that. She would call multiple times, and, it got to the point where we didn't answer because it was the same answer and the same questions, and it was just exhausting. And she was still with it enough that at some point she'd call up and the answering machine would kick on and she'd say something like, "Keith, I know you are there, pick up." And other times she would just call and then she'd say, "Well, I've got nothing new to report." She loved Coke. She loved Coca-Cola. And Molly's, what were they, the brownies? Remember those? She loved those. Anyway, she couldn't sleep. Well, you can't sleep if you drink that much Coke before you go to bed. So we thought we would be smart, and we got her the little ones, right? Makes sense. About a week later, we came, and maybe it wasn't even that long, all the Coca-Cola was gone. Cans were cleaned, stacked very neatly, which was like my mom. And, we said, "Mom, you're not going to sleep if you keep drinking that Coke." "Oh, I didn't drink that Coke." "Well, then who did?" "Oh, we had a bunch of ministers over the other night, and they drank it all." You have to kind of roll with it because, and remember the good times that you had. But in so many ways, she was silently or quietly strong. And it was probably very appropriate, if you recall, she passed away the day before Mother's Day. And I preached the next day. And some will say, or some said at that time, that that's the Sunday your relationship began to bloom with this congregation. Up until that point, this was my hardest church to assimilate into. I don't know why. I still can't tell you why. But after that Sunday and that sermon, it began to change. Maybe people saw me differently. Maybe I acted differently. I don't know. But how appropriately that the person who often paved the way for me throughout my life did so right here. Now, some of you may think after 17, 18 years, it's time to get over that, Keith, and move on. But it is stunning to me. Which made me think that perhaps this Sunday, this Mother's Day was a good time to kind of raise up memories that she left with me and the lessons that were included in them, okay? Which is what I did on that particular Sunday. And one of the first ones that comes to mind is Mom was really big about honest living. Honest living. Now, I'm not talking about honesty, not that she encouraged us to lie and think that was okay, but honest living. And by this I mean that life is not what we make of it, but what we allow it to make with us. You know, that there's nothing to blame out there. You know, you made your decisions, you did this, and now you got to figure it out and go from there. Don't quit, let it go, move on. Life is not what you make of it, but what you do with it, and you work with it. We often fight against all the things that happen in our existence and say we got a raw deal. Well, you know, people like to say, what is that? Life isn't fair. Well, life's fair. It's tough at times for all of us. Right? But if you live honestly or have honest living, you just accept that, and you know that sometimes you have to get down and dirty and muddy, and you just push on. You just push on. You ever ask yourself what makes you tick? What makes you tick? What really drives you in life? What pushes you? What motivates you? What gives you joy and satisfaction in life? Because at the same time, you have to ask yourself, whose approval in all of that are you seeking? Who are you living for? You know, we all have audiences. Every day you have an audience that you're playing to in life. Which ones really matter? Which ones count? If you want to know, just look in your closet. Look in your closet. It's like my attic. It's filled with boxes of stuff. We moved here in 2004, and they're still packed neatly inside. Things that once upon a time we thought were necessary for living, but obviously no longer are needed. Maybe they never were. You know, long before we went top drawer in our wardrobe, or high end in our cars, Mama told us we were unique creations of God. That you didn't need any of that stuff to be the child of God who has value just for who you are, which we were told every day. Every day, no matter how the day went, we were told we were still loved and good people. But you know, that voice that she had, it gets kind of smothered in all of the other ones we hear in life. You know, the notion that to get the part, you have to look the part, or you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Anybody ever heard that one? Mom? I think we'll see. Yeah, okay. You have to look the part to get the part. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. The problem with this is it takes longer than that first impression to get to know who you are. And we don't even take the time to do that. And so, you know, we put up facades and we act this way because we want the part, but we really don't. We want to make that first good impression, and that first good impression is not necessarily who we really are. I was asked to interview one time at what we call is, in the business, we call it a tall steeple church. They're called that because of their size, the influence they have in the community, the who's who list of members, and I immediately knew if I was going to do that interview, then I would have to look different than I do. So, recognizing this, I took my fashion designer Jean with me and hit the mall, right, to upgrade my attire because her participation is absolutely mandatory because I have no taste. And then it dawned on me, as I tried a few things, I thought, I'm becoming somebody else. That's not me. That's just not me. That's not who I am. You can't live like that. You have to live honestly with yourself, or you're dissatisfied with everything. And it won't work anyway. It won't work anyway if you're always trying to act like somebody that you aren't, to fit their mold, to meet their expectations, when you already knew that there was a problem. You know, you can't run very fast if you're always looking at your feet. When Mom said to me as a child, "You don't need that," you know, as a kid you're going, "Well, you're being kind of tight and stingy, aren't you?" But what I've come to realize is that those words were not bad things. They were assuring words. They were assuring me that I was good without that stuff. That who I am, just as I am, I have value. And if other people didn't see that, didn't want to see that, then I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, seeking the wrong things, and wasting their and my time. Their and my time. You know, following graduation from college, I began the process of applying for graduate schools. I knew I wanted to be a minister. And the process of applying for a master's or a doctorate degree or that sort of thing is pretty much the same as when you applied to go to college. You know, maybe a little more in depth, more requests on what they want from you. But the one thing that was certain in all of that was they wanted you to take the graduate record exam, the GRE. You know, it's similar to the SAT and the ACT and the LSAT and all those tests that they give for applications. And I have to tell you that then and now I despise those tests. I despise them. I know they serve a purpose. You know, the SAT is based on males in the 1920s going into the military. It's something like that. I'm sure somebody will look it up and correct me, and that's fine too. But it's something like that. And that just struck me as odd, because I know, you know, there are many different ways of judging what skills and talents and IQs that people have besides those particular tests. And so, being who I was at the time, I filled out the application, I sent it into one particular school with a cover letter stating all the reasons I objected to the graduate record exam test. And if they wouldn't accept me based upon my recommendations and transcripts, I didn't want to go there anyway. Cocky, right? Stupid, yes. Not something I would recommend or encourage anyone else to do, and I would not do it now. But to my surprise, and everyone who knew me, to their surprise, Yale accepted me. And that's when my friends started to say, well, they accepted you because they just wanted to see what this crazy person looked like who wrote that letter to begin with. But you see, you have to be honest. You have to have honest living to share your skills, to be accepted, to trust that you can be vulnerable. And if that doesn't work out, then the only person that you fail in that process, if you don't do that, is yourself, because you're not going to be happy anyway. You'd be miserable. An African-American colleague said to me not too long ago, he said, you can never know how exhausting it is to work each day trying to live up to and to satisfy white people. Wasn't being mean, wasn't being hostile when he said that. He just said, to be successful in the world, I have to act the way they believe a successful person acts. That is, don't act or talk like you might do it at home. Act like them. You know, I'd never really thought of that before, but anytime we live other than who we are, it is exhausting. One other thing I want to share before I'm done this morning, I want to mention that how my mother lived her faith in the biggest way was in the smallest ways. She would say to me, you know, Keith, you need to know the world is hard, life is tough, but you don't necessarily have to respond in the same way. You don't have to be that way just because others are. You know, that's really hard if you drive down Gulf Boulevard these days. Is it not, with all the construction and everything going on? And boy, you just get to the point somebody yells at you and you want to tell them something, right? But no, she said that decency, respect, humbleness are critical for being successful. Not successful in the sense of rising up in the establishment, but simply successful in being a good human being, a decent human being. You know, they would say whenever I went out in high school, remember who you are. Remember who you are. You know, life isn't always perfect. Life doesn't always give us what we want, but life is always good if we receive it that way. Only we can make life, our lives, the lives of others, less than God intended. Only we can make others and ourselves miserable. She would say to me, remember, whenever life leads you out, wherever it takes you, God's already there. God is already there. And two things that I take from this is that God answers prayers. I think all my prayers have been answered. Not always when or how or in the way that I asked for them, but somehow they have been answered. And even, you know, you would probably think I'm foolish to say this, but I also learned that you can't make a bad decision. If you live faithfully, even when your choices are not good, if you keep at it and you keep the divine involved in your life, you get nudges. You get nudges that push you back on the course and in the way that you should go. In other words, keep the faith, and the faith will in turn keep you. I hope I try to teach my kids that. Just keep the faith. Just keep it. It may look different in the end, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It may be better. My mother never believed her job was to teach me what to think, but how to think. And that I would likely live up to what she believed of me. But most important of all, that I was a living message that she would send into a time in the future that she would never see. Wrap your mind around that one. That I was a living message that she would send into a time that she would never see. That in itself is very, very inspiring. Which is what she did, which is what I hope that I've become or am trying to. This is what the Apostle Paul in the scripture Guillermo read a few moments ago. This is what he relays to us regarding the character of the individual Timothy, who Paul drug around with him in all these missions and all these places, getting arrested, getting in trouble, getting thrown off the ship into the sea. But here it says that Timothy was a young man whose soul reflected the teaching he had learned from his grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice. He was the living message that they sent into a time that they would never see. He was strong in faith, honest in character, firmly entrenched in his trust of God, and as such, able to travel wherever God took him or led him and overcome the obstacles the world might set in his way. A servant of Christ and a saint of God. You know, in many churches, we have a lot of beautiful stained glass in this church, but we do not have stained glass images like you might find in Episcopal or Catholic Church of people who have been labeled saints. And of course, the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are often referred to as Saint Matthew, Saint Mark, but there are many others within certain traditions. And a mother was taking her daughter through one of the churches, and they were looking and admiring the artwork in the stained glass windows, and each one had underneath Saint Benedict, Saint Thomas, whatever. And the little girl, puzzled, she said, Mama, what is a saint? It's a tough one to answer. The mother looked at their daughter and said, you know, a saint is simply a person the light shines through. The saint is a person the light shines through. You know what, friends? Life didn't come with an owner's manual. Life didn't come with an owner's manual. It came with a mother. And it's good to remember that today. Amen.